All right, welcome back to the Passion for Craft podcast. Today we are here with another one of my teachers. You're really a sub teacher for us for like a week.
At times, yeah.
Yeah, at times here and there.
Pinch hitting.
But Brock, you want to introduce yourself and all your endeavors?
My name is Brock Leiendecker. I am an instructor in the Carpentry program here at North Bennett Street. I'm a graduate of the Preservation program, and that was a career change for me. I worked in the nonprofit industry in Rhode Island, working as an operations person. So I was doing facilities management, HR, finance, benefits,
All the really fun stuff.
all the good stuff. Yeah.
Sounds terrible.
And one of the things I was doing was managing the build out of community gardens. I was working for an urban agricultural nonprofit, and the development of the properties, buying the properties, building them out, getting them tested, building garden plots, and turning it over to our program staff. That was a lot of fun.
Cool.
And I thought, oh man, this is interesting. I went to at the same time, I was going to a class for people who were working in nonprofits. It was a class designed on trying to figure out where the burnout comes from. Traditionally, nonprofit turnovers 3 to 5 years for employees, and trying to figure out why people burn out. And as part of that, we were supposed to figure out what it is that's so important about the work we're doing. The urban ag nonprofit was teaching people how to grow their own food. And I looked at that and I thought, huh. And then I thought about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I went, oh, I don't know how to grow my own food. I also can't build my own house. I can't do anything that my great-grandparents could do.
Right.
But I can sit at a computer and do stuff like that. And I realized my generation doesn't largely know those things. And the instructor, the professor teaching the class, said, well, what are you going to do about it? I went, huh, that's a bit of a put your money where your mouth is statement.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about leaving my job, and my best friend who went through the carpentry program here said, you like old houses, you like old stuff, you can save those. And I was thinking about ecology and conservation and how do I save a house instead of tearing one down.
Right.
He said, go look at the preservation program. So I did. And then I left my job, worked at a sporting goods store for a year until I came here to school.
No way.
Then I started working as a preservation carpenter. I grew up kind of all over. I was born outside Chicago, grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, a little bit in New Jersey, and then up here in Massachusetts. And then I lived in Rhode Island for a while before coming back to school.
When you went to Preservation Carpentry, what year was that?
2014.
2014. Sweet.
And I had no knowledge.
Yeah.
I had never used a hand plane before. I had never truly swung a hammer before.
Yeah.
Nothing. So I learned everything I do as a preservation carpenter, everything I do as a residential carpenter, I learned in school and then on the job.
Well, and it sounds like the program has been pretty similar from what you went through to what I went through. It sounds like Steve has kept it pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Amongst the
little
the
tweaks
years.
here and there,
Yeah.
but largely I would say it's the same curriculum, the same process for first years as it was for me.
Which is cool because it started, like Robert Adams started it, kind of got that going, and Steve went through the process with him, and then he just continued it on, Dennis Semperman. And so we both done a similar thing that this guy's done too.
So you go to this school, you get out. What do you do?
I started working for Michael Bur. It was his first semester here at school, my second year.
Okay. Michael Burry's second year instructor here at Preservation Carpentry.
Yeah, his first year teaching was my second year. So he was looking for some people to jump on and finish a couple of projects. So I jumped in as soon as we graduated, started working on some projects for him, doing some preservation work, a little bit of timber repair. As the summer ended and he went back to school, I finished up those projects and then was looking for something. And my classmate, Nathaniel Allen, who owns a company called NDA Restorations in Dartmouth, Mass, was looking for a second. So I went down and joined Nathaniel.
So you worked with him for how long? What kind of work were you guys doing?
4 years or so, just over 4 years, doing largely timber and timber repair, but also window and door restoration, making new window and door for historic application, repairing window units, so repairing sills, repairing jambs and casing, a lot of that in situ, and then take back to the shop, the sash and doors, and do repairs on them and bring them back in. That was largely our winter work, was sash and door work, and then as soon as it was nice out, we were timber framing as much as we could.
How did you get back to North Bennett Street?
I started teaching CE classes, community education classes. I was teaching bowl turning, spindle turning and timber framing classes
Nice.
while working. That led to Steve O'Shaughnessy, the first-year instructor in preservation carpentry, had an injury and needed someone to come in and assist him for a semester. The school called me, and I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. That just happened to coincide with a turnover in the staff in the carpentry program. And because I had experience in modern residential carpentry and preservation, the school reached out to me and said, would you come and apply for a position here? I went through the application process, and both Peter Smith, the department head, and I were hired that summer. That was the summer of 2019.
What was your experience in modern residential construction?
There's a lot of questions we want to get into with the modern versus preservation and all that.
So my experience started as, so you have your 2 years of the preservation carpentry program, and I knew I was going to get a lot of preservation experience, but I felt it would be deficient in my education if I didn't learn modern carpentry at the same time.
Yeah.
So the summer in between the 2 years, I went and worked for a modern residential company. Actually, I did two things. I worked for a modern residential company Monday through Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I cut a timber frame for a professor of mine from college.
Yeah.
So I was doing some timber framing work and kitchen, bath.
I think the reason I'm
additions.
20 questions here is I think that, I mean, I'm impressed by your teaching skills and what you're doing here and how you're thinking about craft and building. And I want people that are listening out there to realize that you came into this program not really knowing anything. And now you're teaching classes, which is encouraging to me. This body of knowledge that I'm always talking about, this lost art of building, there is a way to recapture that, and there is a way to learn again. And, I think your experience is proof of that, which is cool.
Yeah, I don't come from a family of tradespeople. My mother's family owned a leather goods business. That's the closest any of us gets to trade.
Yeah.
My grandfather on my mother's side was a lawyer. My grandfather on my father's side was a business manager for a university in Pittsburgh. My dad worked in higher education for his whole career. My mom was a school teacher. Brothers and sisters are all teachers or admin type people. Yeah. I don't know anybody in my family that's an actual true tradesperson except for me.
Right.
So I very much had to catch up. My dad is not somebody that would have busted out a tool to do something at home.
Yeah.
That's not in his wheelhouse. So
Did
I very
you feel
much,
like it was a catching up? Like, did you feel like you had to, I got it?
Because I had classmates that did have experience.
Right.
Like the guy that I ended up working for, he'd worked as a carpenter since he was in high school.
Yeah.
And he was now in his 30s coming to school. He had 20 years of carpentry experience coming in, had his own business for 10 years. Like your classmate, Kevin.
Oh, I feel the same way.
Tons of experience.
Oh, my gosh.
And I'm looking at them going, I'm the idiot in the back.
Yeah,
I have
totally.
no knowledge as to what's going on. And so I'm playing catch up the entire time. And I still very much, you said, based on my work experience and my school education, I'm back here teaching. Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience. I don't have the breadth of experience that you have or that Robert would have had or Dennis. I came back pretty quickly. And so there's very much an imposter syndrome feeling for me where I'm hustling my tail off to learn and master my own skills and making sure that the worst feeling that could happen for a teacher doesn't happen for me. And that's a student ask a question that you don't know an answer to.
Well,
It's terrible feeling.
The reason I wanted to get you on the show is because of an insight you had when we were talking about Build Show and JLC. So Build Show Live has a new live format down in Austin. Brock came the first year, and they, I think, aspire to have a JLC Live type event.
Because you in the past have said JLC does it better than anyone else.
Well, I enjoy the JLC Live. If I'm going to go to a builder show and I want to get something out of it and enjoy it, I'm going to JLC Live. The builder show out in Vegas is I can't even, it's just terrible, okay? Because it's a show for production builders.
It's a different audience.
It's a different audience. And so I go to kind of see what's out there, but every time I go out there, I'm like, do you need to get that, Jackson?
No, I don't.
No, if you need to get that, go ahead.
Just an
we'll
alarm.
stop the. And so we were at Build Show Live. Brock and I are talking, and I think I said something like, "Do you remember this conversation?"
Outside the front doors.
Yeah, I was talking about JLC, and you were like, "Well, there are two different shows."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, well, this show is for guys like you that are builders that are wanting help picking products. JLC is for guys who are actually in the field doing stuff.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really great insight.
JLC to me is very much about training someone to know how to use a new product or a new technique. And the build show is very much to me about the larger theory. It's very much a macro level versus JLC as a micro level. You're learning at JLC, you're trying to decide between a fastener. You're trying to figure out what Simpson hanger to use. You're trying to figure out which house wrap is the right choice for your project. Build Show Live is about why we use house wraps in general. How do we manage air and vapor and thermal? How are we dealing with company culture and developing trade skill to a higher level of effort and execution? Not the same as JLC.
Well, the thing I love about that is because you are thinking about our business and our trades in a intelligent way. And so it makes me say, put you on the spot, where do you think we are as far as building intelligence? If you think about, and I have my biases, which I've made known, but there are, in a preservation world, right? And as far as the lost art of building versus, the build science and things like that. I mean, I'm going to throw it out to you very broadly. Just kind of, what are your thoughts? Because you're teaching, carpenters modern building techniques. You're teaching them build science. I love the program that you and Peter are running. I think it's better than it was when I was here. So anyway, just if you can speak to some of that.
Where to begin? There's a lot there.
It's a lot to unpack.
Totally, it is.
You and I had a conversation in Austin because you and I both contain a lot of skepticism around new product and new technique because of our training, because of our work experience. We look at a 300-year-old house and go, hey, wow, you look at that. Still standing.
Yeah.
Why don't we just do that?
Works great as a house.
Yeah.
And my modern experience looks at it and goes, yes, absolutely true. But how much does that house cost in the environment and in actual dollars to heat and cool? What is the maintenance level for that house? And these are just normal questions.
Yeah.
And it's not a
heating
question.
and cooling, you made it known here, is like one of the biggest issues here versus where you're building.
Sure.
Like,
No,
that's
they're two
something
different
I
environments.
You're
never
worried about
factor in.
cooling, but you're not necessarily worried about heating as much. And we're doing both. And those put two very different stresses on that structure.
Totally.
Swinging. Like in Massachusetts, my house is I live southwest of Boston by about 45 minutes. And that house in the winter is -5 degrees outside. It can be.
Yeah.
And in the summer, it can be 105 degrees.
Right.
And humidity changes that are drastic
Yeah,
between
especially
those
this
two.
close to the sea.
Yeah, that's more than what we faced.
And how do I deal with that as a builder? And how do you deal with that in terms of building science? And there's so much there. Building science is so complex. How do you make the right choices? And then from a different lens, from my background, from my training here at school, how do I balance my appreciation, understanding, and skill of preservation with the modern world, with lowering a carbon footprint, with making a house more water resistant, making it more a little bit tighter. You and I both would say that a house that is so unbelievably tight that has to have air pumped in and out of it might be too far in that direction. And is that truly the healthiest
Agreed. Yeah.
quality for that house?
Right.
But I also look at a house that's incredibly drafty and go, well, yeah, that one's got a lot of nice fresh air moving through it, but it's also really freaking hard to heat that house or cool it.
Sure.
And so I'm burning a ton of fuel to do that, whatever my source is, whether it doesn't matter if it's geothermal or whatever, I'm still using a lot of energy to heat and cool that house. And so is there a balancing point between these two things? And where do we find that? And that, to me, is could be and should be one of the most interesting questions for building sciences. Yeah, great. You can make a house super, super tight. Congratulations. You're just wrapping it in a plastic bag.
Yeah.
We could do that with Tyvek. We all know that it sucked, but we could do it. And so now we're working on permeabilities. But how do I roll back a little bit of that and look at a house that's a little bit more breathable and a little bit more natural and a little bit more comfortable feeling inside, that isn't quite so hermetically sealed? And And I don't know the answers to those things. Those are the things I'm thinking about when I go to a build show event or I go to BS and Beer. I love going to BS and Beer that happens in Waltham at the Studio for High Performance Design and Construction. I listen to the presentations and I'm always sitting there thinking, how do I balance this? They have these models built inside the space. One is a brand new style construction and one is clearly parts taken from a house that is probably late 19th, maybe early 20th century. Roughs on, board sheathing, heavy, full-size, heavy timbered. It's probably balloon framed construction. And I look at the two and I go, oh, interesting that you would have that in this space that's all about high-performance design.
Right.
And are they thinking about how do I adapt the high-performance design to a structure that exists or one that I want to build that isn't super, super tight?
Yeah.
And I have some concerns also around the materials. I'm very worried about spray foam. I've heard your commentaries around, especially open cell being one of the next biggest issues. We got over
asbestos.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Asbestos. We got through that. Is that open cell going to be the next biggest issue? And beyond that, is closed cell going to become an issue?
Sure.
What's open cell versus closed cell?
It's the foam that's being sprayed for insulation.
Yeah.
It can be purchased in boards as well, and there are open cell and closed cell versions of that.
The open cell, if it gets wet, it can't dry or won't dry.
Yeah.
Moisture can trap inside the open cell structure of the foam versus a closed cell structure. It doesn't have a pocket or void for that water to get into.
So open cell, they'll spray it into the cavity and it'll fill up the whole cavity and they have to cut it off. This closed cell, they'll spray it and it only gets about 2 inches thick.
Got it.
I think that was a wise answer in that. How do we balance it? We don't know. I don't know either, right? I mean, I have the thing that gets me going, the thing that frustrates me so much is the people that say, this is the answer, right? Mm-hmm. No, if you do this, okay, now we've done it. And I think that the variables are changing too much, too fast. I mean, just our two different climates, right? That there is not a one-fits-all solution that's appropriate for Texas and Massachusetts. I mean, it's just not. And so it drives me crazy when these guys chase after a blower door test or an ACH rating and assume then that now I've got the best house. Mm-hmm. That drives me up the wall. So
you look at product and you'll look at a fairly new product on the market and they'll tell you, well, it's got a 30-year rating on it. It hasn't been around for 30 years. And I get that you've tested it in a lab and you believe it's good for 30 years, but until it really sits on a shoreline in southern Massachusetts and lives through 30 winters,
100%.
I don't necessarily believe you. I'm sorry, make me a skeptic or a curmudgeon, but I don't trust it.
It's also like, what variable are you forgetting in the process? Like, are you really changing the temperature from 30 degrees to 100 degrees, 45 different times? But are you remembering that there's salt water? Are you remembering
totally? I can think of
UV exposures,
20 products that have come out in my building career. I remember Marvin came out with the perfect paint job. That it was a factory paint job that came from the thing.
And we use it on all houses today.
You'll never have to paint your windows again. This is a 50-year paint, and 5 years later, it failed, and it just, these grandiose promises, which as a building supplier you do, but it's just, there's too many examples of that, to your point. The other thing that makes me go is like the glues. We are really relying a lot on glue. And so, is the glue going to last 30 years?
Yeah. One of the things that I took from preservation, especially from Michael, is reversibility.
Yeah.
Always, even no matter what I'm doing, even if I'm putting trim in a modern bathroom, I still think about reversibility because something's going to happen.
And reversibility, just so people will know, is being able to install something, take it off, and you're not damaging the surface. It's
the
ability to reverse something,
but to take it back to the original, right? Yeah. So go ahead.
Like if I'm using mastics and adhesives to apply my trim. Can I reverse that? Yeah, with a sledgehammer and a crowbar, I can reverse that, but not very easily. Versus if I pay attention to the concept of reversibility and I intentionally design a bathroom or a deck or framing or whatever it is around that reversibility so that someday it can be undone. And especially in things that wear out, like exteriors, they're designed to wear out. Whatever is on the outside of the house, all of that's designed to be a consumable over the lifespan of that house. The frame is what's supposed to live and continue living on. Everything else on the outside, you remove at some point.
Right.
The cladding, the trim, the windows and doors, the roofing, all of that's designed to wear out. You replace it at some point.
Yeah.
Some of it has incredibly long lifespans, like slate roofs and stone tile roofs and really well-maintained wood product exteriors. Like Michael Bur has a project that he's worked on Nantucket, I think. One of the meeting houses has a eastern white pine shingled sidewall that's been maintained and painted, and it's over 100 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But it's been maintained.
Yeah.
And so you look at all this and you think, okay, well, where's the reversibility? Where's the maintenance factor in everything I do to make sure that the work I do can be accessed and changed and fixed and something else? You
Yeah.
know, it can be worked on by the next craft person that comes in.
Yeah.
If I trim something, I want someone to be able to remove the trim because the next person wants a different trim on it.
That maintenance factor, I think that was, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but when we were talking, sometimes Brock comes down from his lofty tower in Carpentry to just the lowly
next
preservation.
floor
The
above.
ivory
Yeah.
tower.
Still sitting below the furniture program.
Yeah, we're all under the furniture program.
we're all under that.
But you know, he comes down and he'll talk about an episode that something we've talked about and provide a lot of like really insightful comments on stuff. And one of the ones, we were talking about the maintenance of things being a reason why you couldn't do the longevity score on a house. So like how long is a house gonna last? Like that's another factor. Maybe not why you couldn't do it, but another factor in making it.
Yeah, that was
you
a
know.
really interesting episode, and that's a really fantastic idea or concept. This longevity rating for a house
Because you've got an R value. You've got it now like a house year value.
You're looking to go purchase a house. Yeah, you think about the mechanicals. Like you go in and go, oh, the roof's 4 years old. Or, yeah. But what's the entire house? Is the entire house have a score of, it's like a Carfax for a house. This one's got 20 years left on it.
Yeah.
This one's got 80 years left on it. Cool.
Yeah.
Let's use one of those. And that maintenance entirely plays into that,
Right.
which is a big piece of the material, like composite decking.
Yeah.
Very low maintenance. But does composite decking with no maintenance have a longer longevity than a redwood deck
Right.
or a mahogany deck that's really well maintained? Is that one going to stick around longer than an asphalt roof? Asphalt roof has 15 to 30 years depending on where it is and how close trees are to it and all that kind of stuff. A shingled roof, Alaskan yellows, really well installed, oiled. What's the length on that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it has. I would argue that if I don't pay attention to my asphalt roof, because it's supposed to be a no maintenance kind of roof,
Right.
largely, that's got 20 years on it, maybe 20, 25. I would argue that Alaskan yellow will last me longer, but it requires maintenance. It should get oiled.
Right. And if you don't, it'll just last
Periodically.
less long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you're spending a lot more money getting the same length as an asphalt roof.
Right.
So, we're talking about a
bad
lot
math
of building products. We're talking about how do you prepare the carpentry students that are going out there into the world, I think very well prepared. How do you prep them for success? Is your line of thinking that if they have these skills, cabinets, framing, stairs, drywall, whatever those other skills are, that I've prepared them, or are you helping them think about building, what they're doing?
Yeah, I wouldn't call stairs or trim or cabinetry or any of that kind of stuff a skill. That's an application of skill. And so I want them to be incredibly comfortable with measurement and layout and cutting and joining a surface and how to use the tools really, really well to their end result, whatever they're aiming for. How do you do that really well, and then apply that to whatever the task is, whether it's installing trim.
How do you teach that?
We teach it through the tasks. So you're going to frame a wall, but while you're framing that wall, you're going to focus incredibly hard on accurate square cuts on your studs, on paying attention to the length, on making sure that when I hook my tape and pull it out and I mark my pencil, have I taken into account the thickness of the pencil that I'm using? Or in framing this, not as much, but on something like the cabinet lesson. Did you pay attention when you made the story pole for those cabinets to the thickness of your pencil? Well, when we go put the story pole up against the cabinet after you built the box, after you built it, the carcass, does it match or doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Did you cut the lines when you were cutting the plywood? Did you split the lines? Did you save them? All of that. Yeah. That's what's really important. How we apply it should be universal. So I can shingle, like just because I can, the skills that are required of me to install cedar shingles on a sidewall are the same skills that are required of me to put in trim or to put in flooring or to put in
measuring, cutting, planning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just the measuring, cutting, planning. The big piece that we try to work on throughout the year is using your ability to think about what you're doing as well as the next step ahead. How does everything I do now impact the next thing I do? What's the tolerance stack up of everything I do? If my stud length cuts are slightly off, what did that just do to the entire house? If my walls weren't put up 90 degrees to each other perpendicular in a corner, and now I put drywall on and I was a little messy with my drywall, when I go to put my cabinets in, what is that going to look like?
Sure.
And paying attention to all these processes and seeing if you make a mistake here, it can affect you 3 steps down the road. Mm-hmm. And paying attention to all of that. So it's attention to detail in everything you're doing, being intentional in everything you do, which is really tough. And it ends up producing a slow carpenter, which we'll get some flack from some of our employers. They'll say, wow, your students are good, your graduates are good, but they're slow. And my usual response to that is, well, yeah, no kidding. They've been doing it for 9 months.
Yeah.
What did you know in 9 months in? You knew how to hustle, great, but were your cuts crap? Because I don't care how fast you move as long as you're accurate. I can get you to be faster by gaining efficiencies more easily than I can teach you to be a more accurate carpenter.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those.
We had an issue with this on a job site in the fall. We were building sheds.
Yeah.
And students were cutting blocking for basically fire blocking for inside the studs, stud bays. And they were just cutting them to random lengths. And I said, stop, what are you doing? They said, well, we just measured the bays and cut them. I said, no. What's the space inside those bays?
Right.
So what do you mean? I said, that's a known. If this is 16 on center framing, what's the space inside those studs? It's 1.5 inch stud framing. It's 16 on center. It's 14.5 from one face to the other. Cut them all 14.5. Well, what if that doesn't fit? If it doesn't fit, that should be a clue to you that something's wrong.
Right.
Either the studs are bowed or your layout's wrong or something else has gone wrong. You can't just cut to fill.
Yeah.
All of a sudden the whole wall's messed up.
Right.
You got to cut. You have to be intentional in what you're doing. Otherwise, it's going to create other problems. But it also tells you, oh, I made a mistake someplace. Let's back up, find out what the issue is. And I said there was a big issue around like, well, aren't you being a little too particular on this? And I said, no, I'm not. Because I can't have you graduate and go work for somebody and they have to teach you what the distance is between one stud face and the other. Mm-hmm. I failed if that's the issue. Well, they can help you get faster and more efficient, and they should. That's their job as the employer. My job is to make sure you understand the fundamentals of how to be a carpenter and the fundamentals of the different topics. So when you graduate from here, from North Bennett Street's carpentry program, what I expect is that you have the fundamentals of skill. You can cut, mark, layout, visualize, all that kind of stuff. You understand building science at a basic level. You understand building code at a basic level. You understand overall project management at a basic level so that you know where you are in the flow. I expect you to understand the process for how to cut a hip roof, how to frame a wall, how to build and install cabinets, how to do trim. I expect when you graduate, and you use the term apprentice, when somebody graduates from here, apprentice. I don't like that term. When my students graduate, I tell them what you should be on the bell curve of students graduating. Right in the middle, you're an assistant carpenter. You can jump in and work right with the carpenters. You can set up cut stations, you can cut, you can lay out, you can jump in and assist them with whatever they're doing on the job site. I don't like to call them apprentices because to me, an apprentice is someone who is really green. Now they're green on a job site. They're still getting used to that, but they have an immense amount of knowledge when they graduate that they can put to task. They have to earn their place, but they can put that to task once they've earned a place.
I mean, it needs to be noted that, every carpenter student that wants a job has a job when they finish your program.
Yep.
Right. You got people lining up to hire them.
Yep.
Which is awesome.
I get emails and phone calls every week from individuals and companies saying, I'm looking for somebody.
Yeah.
I think that's like unheard of. Like the graduation rate from the school alone is crazy.
We
know
have-
not every department.
Based on our
but
based on our accreditation, we have to have 70% employment in the first 6 months of graduating.
yeah,
And I tell students when they're looking at a perspective or somebody who's in the program, if you want it, have the desire, the drive, and work hard at school, I can guarantee you a job someplace.
yeah,
Doing largely what you want to be doing, whether
Right.
it's framing or you want to work for an interior trim company
Yeah.
or
See, but
something like that.
I think I would. I mean, you're being a little bit humble to call him an assistant carpenter because
bell curve.
I think
Bell curve.
I think
The
that
high performing ones, I would call carpenters. Like
Yeah.
I would say the way they
I
get hired by a
understand.
company,
Okay, yeah,
they should
no,
be
I
a full
appreciate
fledged
that.
carpenter.
because I think you probably know more than I do. Can you get that education anywhere else? I mean, is there another place training what you guys are training?
It's not that you can't get it someplace else. It's the amount of time it takes to get it.
Yeah.
So it's the way we talk about it is if you were to go and work for a construction company, it would take 3 to 5 years to see the variety of
yeah,
Yeah.
project pieces
Yeah.
that we're going to, and it's not like, oh, you get exposed to how to make cabinets. No.
You're building.
You're making the cabinets. I'm standing next to you going, okay, let's see you make the cuts.
Yeah.
This is your cabinet. You're taking it home. Let's go.
Right.
Versus on a construction company, you're not even going to sniff the cabinets.
Yeah. You're around it. Like you're seeing them get done.
You're seeing somebody else
You
install.
might carry
Yeah,
them into the house.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, you're definitely going to
They might even be worried about you
cuts.
carrying the cabinets. Or like cutting a roof. Hand cutting a roof, they're going to look at you and go, okay, well, the roof stock's over there. Can you move it to here where we're going to cut it? And then you can assist us while we lay out.
Yeah. We need an extra
Versus my students understand now they've only cut a couple of roofs while they're in school. So you got to shake off a little bit of that rust and
That's still more than.
but I've had people who own multi-million-dollar construction companies come in and go, I don't have a clue how to cut a hip roof. I'm like,
my
cool.
gosh.
Every single one of my students can
Most
cut a hip roof.
builders don't.
But every single one of my students that graduates has cut a hip roof. They have cut jack rafters. They have cut hip rafters. They have troubleshoot them. They have put them together. They have gone through an immense amount of roof math to make sure they understand how all of that interrelates, how to understand where to find the ridge height, the theoretical heights versus the physical, the actual heights, all of that kind of stuff.
The students that I've seen in your program look sharp. They all look like kids I'd hire, right? They hustle. They're smart. They look like they know what they're doing. I mean, you must be pleased with that group that you're.
I am.
Right?
Yeah. On the whole, I would say I am.
Yeah. Don't think about the problem kids.
I would say I am impressed. Every year there are students, the majority of students exceed my expectation. And I have, and they'll tell you, very high expectations. I have incredibly high expectations. And I tell the students when they come in, I have incredibly high expectations for you because I have an incredibly high expectation of myself. I don't set you to a standard any higher than I put myself to. But unfortunately, I put you to the standard I put myself to.
Yeah.
And so that's...
It took me working with you to actually like you. Because
I come off like a little bit of a jerk.
you had a hard start with me. I was doing something and you're like, what are you doing up there? And why are you doing it that way? And it was like, this? Because I'm doing this. I gave an answer. You're like, okay. And I was like, that guy was the worst. And then we started working with you and it was like, oh no, he just is excellence. Excellence is key. And so I was like, oh, great. And I was fine. But I was mad at first. I was like, hey.
Dirty little secret, not so secret.
Yeah.
The students come in in the fall and I come off like a real hard ass. And then they realize little by little, oh, I'm a total teddy bear.
Yeah.
And I'd like to tell jokes, and I like to hang out and relax, but I have incredibly high expectations.
Right.
When it's time to move.
Yeah.
Bust your ass. Don't walk. I don't want to see you like lollygagging. Move with purpose. Everything you do is intention.
Yeah, I think you've taught that well, because that's what I see when I'm coming around the thing. All right, so to my favorite question. What's the state of craft?
Interesting question. In the most recent episode, you talk a lot about the materials and the techniques and the modern side of it, removing a lot of the
This is
craft.
what you didn't learn at North Bennett.
Oh,
Yeah. Sorry. There's a lot especially in the modern realm of carpentry, that has removed the craft from it. And I don't think it's removed. I think it's actually made it easier if you reach for it. I think, unfortunately, it's also made it easy to not reach for it.
Right.
But you can still use. I see some people doing things on social media, and I look at it and I go, wow, you could totally have half-assed that, and it probably would have been fine for whoever that client was. But you went way above and beyond on that. The way you thought about the trim details, even just a deck, the way somebody thinks about the framing underneath the decking to make sure that it really works for the way they want to lay out that deck because it's got a weird shape. And I look at it and I go, man, hell yeah. Way to go on thinking with intention and thinking, which is to me a lot of like the old school carpenter mentality of, no one's ever going to appreciate this.
Sure.
But I know that I did it.
Sure.
And I'm going to love the heck out of it.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to think back on that project and go, I remember what I did there. I remember the little framing detail I put in the corner there to support that and how happy I was with it. And no one's ever going to see it. The
Right.
dumpster will see it someday when they tear this house down, and no one else will have ever seen it.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that I did that.
So examples like that, I agree, are encouraging.
And I think the craft is still there. I do think that modern materials have made it easier to put lipstick on a pig. And modern techniques have made it a little easier to do that. You don't have to work quite as hard
I guess
to get a product done. But I think you look at the leaders in the industry and you can still see, wow, man, there's an incredible effort put in on that, and an incredible amount of forethought and intentionality in the way they plan that out, and the craft is there for that.
Well, again, I think one of the whatever you want to call it, the compromises in this thing is that siding. Let's just look at siding.
Your favorite example?
Well, it's so easy. It's an easy example.
Yeah. And there's so many products. There's so many products.
Everybody has a siding.
And you look at some of the products now that tell you to leave gaps, and you're like,
oh my gosh. And so, and the
Wow.
manufacturer's challenge is install. And I was just talking to someone, who were you just talking to, saying that install was their thing. That instead of, having the siding that goes up on the house where you actually do a story pole, we were just out at the job. They were laying out a story pole so
We call them story sticks.
both good terms, both okay. I always use story stick because that's what Steve always called it.
Yeah.
And then I worked for somebody else, and they were like story pole, and I was like, what the hell's a story pole? Oh, it's the
They
same
were
thing.
laying
All right.
out on the board and batten siding. They were laying out the siding so that the astragal would drop in the right place and wouldn't end up in the wrong place. They had a story stick pole laid out, right, laying it out. I went to Colonial Williamsburg and I saw that the bead on the siding lined up perfectly with the windowsill, and so it wasn't cut wrong. How do you do that? Well, you have to do a story pole, story stick. You lay out the wall. You figure out where everything's going to go. You plan. Versus what happens today, where you get the pre-made window, the pre-made siding. You stick the clip stick up on the board, and then you snap your siding in place, and it all ends up jacked up. And look, I see that, and I'm pulling my hair out.
Yeah.
Okay. At the same time, I look at historically that house ownership pre-William Levitt was 42%. Post-William Levitt was 65%, which is where about it is today. So me holding on to the craft having to be this standard, I think, keeps people from living in houses, which I think is a good thing. So
No,
where's
you
the
think
balance?
people living in houses is a good thing, not keeping people from living in houses.
Right.
Okay,
You know
just
what I
trying to- Yeah, because it could have been misconstrued both ways. You said, which keeps people from living in houses, which is a good thing, which wasn't what you meant. Contextually, yeah. That was just a bad clip.
Levittown's increased the ability for people to access housing. But were they built for a function of speed and the removal of craftsmanship to allow more people to get into houses? And was that a fair trade-off to remove this craft of house building, of home construction, in order to make it quick for? I mean,
Well, I mean, the consequences of Levittown, in my mind, are McMansions, are things where basically a production builder learned how to build cheap and fast and realized I could build a 5,000 square foot house like this and just put a little more, trim and granite countertops in there, and it's the same poorly built, quickly built product, just on a bigger scale now.
Then they start to learn ABC house, and then they've got a whole development.
So then now in that process, in that time frame, the architect's been pushed out. There's no designer involved. The builder's controlling all the design choices. He wants it as quick and fast as possible. And there are people, I did a video on the snout-nosed houses, and that is the result of Levittown teaching people to build cheap and fast. We end up with ugly houses, poorly built, right? And so do I need to let go of it and just say, you know what? It's a crap house and it's going to last 20 years, but it's a house, Or do I say, no, we can be better guys. We can, where's the balance?
I also think if people were building at the same quality that Levittown was being built at, it would be a different conversation slightly.
And I think if manufacturers were not making crap products that are just pressed wood and glue, right, that we would, what is the, some of these products we're putting in our houses, I mean, have you seen the production housing, the sheathing that they allow in those houses? It's basically cardboard.
Yeah.
And you could push your hand through it. Somehow it's been tested in a lab so that there's shear strength because they're allowing it as the sheathing on the outside of these houses. It is crap. It is absolute crap.
Have you seen that inspector guy? Do you know what I'm talking about? There's this guy who is a house inspector, and he goes through and always is like recording what he finds wrong, and he'll find like rafters that'll just do that. And he's like, look at that. They missed a nail here. They missed a nail here. They missed a nail here. I mean, it's some scary videos.
The quality of craftsmen in production building in Texas, I've had I've talked to guys where, they're looking down a hallway and the headers of the doors are like this, looking down this thing, are just like, oh my gosh.
Drywall guy will fix it.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, there's the balance I'm trying to strike, right? I hear about what you're teaching your guys, and it's so encouraging. It's so awesome. And yet I think about building out there. I'm just like, and maybe it's Texas. Well, I know there's a difference between the quality of craftsmen in Massachusetts versus Texas. There is. So
that's one of the questions that gets raised is there a difference between regions?
Yeah.
Is California different?
Yeah.
Is Florida different? Is the Midwest different? Is New England different?
And it's got to be
there
the
is.
further away you get from good old buildings.
Because you have amazing old construction and architecture in Chicago. You have amazing and old construction in Pennsylvania, in Colorado. You have amazing in California.
Yeah.
You have phenomenal construction in different places. I look at it's the same idea, but slightly different. Is I look at the detailing alone in especially in industrial or commercial or governmental buildings, and you look at it and you go, wow, these buildings from the 20s are absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And you look at the buildings they put up today and you go, wow, that is a turd.
Yeah.
Why did we do that?
Totally.
It's not like we don't have anybody that can do that, but we didn't want to do that. But you could, but you choose not to. There's a lot of the main question you have of what is the state of craft and how does that apply to the industry and the people in the industry raises a lot of questions. One of the big questions is, why did Levittown begin? Why do we have production building? Well, what are the reasons for it? We needed housing faster post-war, World War II. We needed cheaper housing because people couldn't afford what existed before that, or not as many people could afford it. So we needed a more affordable home. We needed more of them more quickly. And so that chicken or the egg, that created the place for this speed built style, whether it's the Levittown stuff or the Sears and Roebuck style housing. Certain things I look at and I think, oh man, I really love those houses. But they also completely removed the craft from the building of that house. Mm-hmm. And so you look at that and there are multiple questions. Why did we do that? Was there any other solution there? You look at it today and you think, okay, what's the state of craft? And like a lot of things at this current juncture in our country, it's incredibly expensive to do really good work. Because if I have a good carpenter, they should be getting paid a wage that supports their life and supports their family and can keep them doing what they do. But do Americans, do people fully appreciate how much it costs to have a well-constructed home? Do they have any concept of, I just had this argument with my dad and my mother. We were at lunch after a soccer game for my nephew, and they said, oh, there's a guy coming around our neighborhood. They live in a 55 and over community. There's a guy coming around, and he's asking $600 to paint front doors. How much does a can of paint cost? And so I got my dander up and I broke that down and I said, sure, let's talk about how long it takes for him to take the door down, sand it, do any touch up he needs to, paint that, or they, she, he, they,
whatever,
paint it, clean it up, get it ready, get it primed, get it painted, sand it, put a second coat on it, put it back up. You think that's and you think, oh, actually, I think the guy was asking like $300. And I said, you think that all takes what, 15 minutes? No. It probably takes, I don't know, at least a half a day. How much do you think paint is? $15, $20? Yeah, try $65, $70 for a gallon of paint from Home Depot or Lowe's.
Yeah. Right. For a cheap gallon.
Yeah. Plus the primer, plus whatever other materials that person needed. And so now you take that off the top and you're looking at, out of that $300 budget, that person's got for their income $275 or something.
Right.
Or from $300 has like $175 or something. $100, $175, something like that. And you think it takes what, a half a day? Sure. So what is that person now paying themselves? $20 an hour? They could be making more flipping burgers. Yeah. But you think that they're asking too much money.
And you're beating them up.
And unfortunately, what you don't quite understand is that you're incredibly ignorant over what it costs to do anything. Yet you have no problem when the plumber, the electrician, or the HVAC person tells you how much it's going to cost, or a mechanic for your car, because you have no choice. But every time a carpenter comes up, they go, oh, why do you need to make so much money? Why are you charging so much for this?
That is interesting.
That is interesting.
I've never thought about that.
Maybe it's just the fact that you are completely and unbelievably ignorant of anything that has to go into that process and don't know how long or how much money it takes. Yet we think that the carpenter should only be getting paid $20 an hour.
Maybe we have to start scaring people into carpentry. Like maybe we have to be like, you know how like plumbing goes out, your whole house is ruined. Electricity goes out, or you're getting shocked.
Outside of a tree falling on your house, nobody calls a carpenter an emergency.
Oh, totally.
Nobody needs an emergency vanity.
But maybe that's where we.
It's just not there. And I get that, and I totally
just start instilling fear into like, well, those orbital sanders, they are really dangerous nowadays. It's a high hazard job.
The thing we talk about with the students is, here's the unfortunate reality of being a carpenter. You are going to love what you do. You are never going to get paid enough for what you do. And everyone else on the job site, outside of the laborers, are going to make more money than you do.
Let me.
Their amount of time on the job site will be a blink of an eye. But you'll be there from the moment the foundation is dug out.
Here's the deal. And through
the time that's handed off.
You need to encourage them that they need to get good at that. Because my business, my company, I still am educating the client of what it costs and they think I'm too expensive. And, I can't afford me, right? So I know I'm expensive, but the fact is, for the work that we do, for the design we put into it, for the historic precedent, I am always educating my client about what's going on. Here's why our 100-year window is a 100-year window. There's no plastic, right? There's nothing in this thing that's going to fail. it is that I think is a carpenter problem that I think is interesting, but it reminds me that I'm always doing the same thing with my client. Now, I've got a question because I love what you're doing. Is your program scalable?
In what way?
Well, like I'm sitting there going,
That's a hot question, by the way. You're putting me on a.
why is that a hot question? Because I'm sitting there going, could there be a North Bennett Street Carpentry program in Dallas, in Fort Worth? Could this be a program that you could take out to 10 cities around the country because it's incredibly valuable what you're teaching?
Especially with the rate of
if
students
you're
walking out, people requesting.
The amount of stuff that you're training them in 9 months, right? 8 months, 7 months?
Yeah, September to May.
is powerful. Okay, it's nowhere else can you said, you're on the job for 5 years before you get all this kind of experience. It's like it just occurred to me while we were sitting there talking. I was like, well, how scalable is that program?
Yes, it's scalable.
I think so.
In multiple ways. So I think of it in a couple different ways. One, it's scalable in the fact that it could grow into more than a year.
I was going to ask that, but you saying it could get done in 9 months is like, oh, yeah.
It gets done in 9 months, but as we tell the students on day one, it's drinking from a fire hose.
Right.
It's
Sure.
and it's not being turned off until you graduate.
Yeah.
But there are things that we could do in another year, like getting into architectural millwork and making moldings and using modern process for making moldings. So using a Williams and Hussey, using shapers to make custom moldings to replicate moldings to go into a project. Things like creating entryways that we don't have the time to cover.
Yeah.
PC gets into it.
Yeah.
And you're doing it from a historical lens.
We are.
But there's a modern lens to that too that could be based in historical molding profiles, but could be done on a modern house.
Right.
So there are other things that could be on. We could dive deeper into stairs. We could dive deeper into roof framing. The more complex pieces of our curriculum could be unpacked in additional time that we just don't have time for.
Right.
Could it be chained? Could I throw up one in Dallas, in Los Angeles, in Denver, in Chicago? I don't see why not.
Right.
I don't see why that's not possible. Requires a heck of a lift. Part of my answer to that would be there are people in New England that don't know the name of my school, our school.
Yeah.
What we are, even without everybody knowing who we are in our own area, our own region. Imagine what we could be if everybody knew who we were.
Yeah.
Well,
There's a tagline sometimes used that we're the Harvard of trade schools. Harvard has a line around the globe trying to get in.
Yeah.
If I had that in my program, what would this program be like?
Be a lot easier to open up a school in Dallas, Los Angeles.
If we had that kind of name recognition, it would make it easier to go someplace
more
else.
obvious,
But we're amazing.
Yeah.
North Bennett Street School is stunning.
Yeah.
What the students produce in this building is, in every program, is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that's with the name recognition we have now.
well, it's that standard that it sounds like you're introducing to your guys that like, look, guys, my expectations here, and you're going to get here, right? And so that's what a good teacher does, I think. This has been awesome. This is I really like your intelligent approach to craft and building and what we're doing. And so I really appreciate you coming on here.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah, no,
It's a challenge every day.
yeah, I love it, and I think you're doing a great job. I think that you and Peter have a program, and I mean this. Like when I was with Robert, the Carpentry program was like, yeah. I look at what you guys are doing, and I think it's powerful. I think it should be scalable. And we're looking for a new president right now, and one of the attributes I want in that new president is someone who can take this. The incredible things that happen here at the school aren't known as well as they should be, and the opportunity should be to take this, what we're doing, what you guys are doing, and scale it and teach more people. So.
And don't worry.
That's what I hope to happen.
The PC class now has taken that approach to just say carpentry. Right,
Well, I think we've been known as the zoo on two because it's loud, it's
Zoo on two.
it's intense.
we are the most
We're-
attended program, right? Like you'll have 40 people or something.
No, we have 26.
Okay,
but we're
26.
full.
Yeah.
Carpentry has
CF.
CF Cabinet and Furniture has 40 students.
Oh, okay, damn. But theirs is over like
Because
3
it's
years.
It's 4 semesters.
Cool.
Same time frame as yours, but
Yeah.
they move as a semester cohort.
Yeah.
You move as a yearly cohort.
Right.
So it's a different
Yeah,
setup to
definitely.
it. Which Peter and I have looked at that and gone,
I think it's cool that both you and Peter come from the
stuff like
PC program. I
Yeah,
think
it is
that's,
fun.
I think that's
And-
appropriate.
in the last 15 to 20 years, the carpentry staff are almost always preservation. Before us, it was Brian and Jeff, classmates from PC. In the past, it's been other PC instructors. I don't know what it is. There must be a skill set or something that we learn in PC that allows us to be
I
a
think
decent
what
teacher.
PC did for me
I don't
was
know.
help me see the whole landscape of building, past stuff, new stuff, and gave me perspective on new building that I don't think it would have had. So
Yes, I would agree entirely with that. I think what it also does is bakes in a fair skepticism because of so much emphasis and focus on the past
Yeah.
and how well things were done.
Mm-hmm.
You then look at all the new hot and go, I'm not sure that passes a sniff test for me.
Yeah.
yeah,
It also
Sorry.
it gave me so much comfort just coming from him and knowing all his biases against common like current trade craft stuff. I walked in and I was like, is the carpentry program legit? Because they're like using all modern building stuff. They're using Pella windows. Is that like not allowed? Are we allowed? And
not allowed.
and but then when I met you and I met Peter and I heard both you guys, Steve was explaining that you guys both went through the PC program. I was like, oh, okay. Well, if they know all the stuff that like about preservation, about all the old stuff, and they're still using this stuff, then there's something to it. They're thinking through these things at least, and then it made me
Lot of
kind of
good
go, oh, okay, cool. But I think part of that is just the poisons of growing up with the skeptic over here.
It's
yeah.
It very much is Peter and I treading with a foot in both ponds and,
Yeah.
and thinking, okay, I have to teach modern carpentry that respects the way modern carpentry is done
Yeah.
while also appreciating the attention to detail and the tradition that I bring from preservation
Yeah.
to that. So when I tackle trim, I don't think about it like a modern
Right.
finish carpenter. I think about it like a preservation carpenter.
But can you imagine? Can you imagine if some guy who was like a production carpenter for years, who just came into the program, and was like, "Oh yeah, I know I've been doing this stuff for a while." I don't know
Yeah,
how
I
many
mean-
good enoughs you'd get, or if any. I don't know. I'm not trying to be insulting to any production
yeah.
carpenters out there, but if it seems like there's something to that.
You become biased, and
Mm-hmm.
if you learn in that world, you are biased to the old. So anyway,
Look at masonry. Today's masons don't even fully. This is a generalization.
that's
My-
mostly true.
My feeling on today's masons is that they've lost an understanding of traditional mortars.
100%.
They don't understand lime-based mortars. They've only been taught Portland
Yeah.
mortars. And how many of them have done the calculations to look at a Portland mortar and say, oh, I need this wall to support X PSI, and then find out that your Portland cement is 5 times that?
Yeah.
And you look at it and go, well, fair. I got no problem with over the top. I'm a timber framer. Everything I do is a little bit more heavy than it needs to be. But if lime is 3x what you needed,
Yeah.
isn't that okay?
Yeah.
Did you have to go with 8x what you needed for strength in the wall to the
Right.
point where you're actually cracking the brick because the Portland mortar is too strong?
Too strong, yeah.
For the material, the actual masonry unit you're using?
Right.
And how do you bring that back?
That's so true.
Brock,
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you,
thanks for
buddy.
being on.
Appreciate
Wonderful.
it. Yeah, this is fun. Good stuff.
This was a little stressful, I'm not going to lie. When I got the text message last night, I just went, crap. Mal went, what's wrong? And I said, I just got asked to go on a podcast, and I don't know if I can do that.
You did great. You did
Yeah,
great.
you did great.
Well,
Really
thanks for
good.
watching this episode, and
Yeah.
we'll see you in the next one.